Hello and welcome to the Crown Hill Podcast. This is Patrick Sabecki, and I'm back again with Mark Luby. How are you, Mark?
Doing all right.
Good. So today we're doing a little bit of it's not a break per se in our distinctive series.
This is a follow-up.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say it's like this is point A in some ways to the conversation we had last time about complementarianism. Because when we talked about complementarianism, one of the most common questions we get when we talk about, hey, this is a distinctive of our church, is, okay, can women be pastors in the church? Or the question is phrased, what's the role of pastors and the role of women in the church? And so we just wanted to spend some time talking about that today, because we would say part of being complementarian is saying, and Mark, you will feel free and we'll fill this in the rest of the time,
great.
But part of being complementarian is saying one of the distinctive differences between men and women is that qualified men are given authority to rule in the church as elders / pastors in a particular way that is different than the rest of the body.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing for the flourishing of the church and for the people of God.
Yeah. And today this conversation is going to mostly focus on the church. So we're not trying to touch on predominantly implications in the family or society at large between men and women, though we believe that there are differences that are significant and important for the outplaying. But we're talking particularly about the church. And the big metaphor that we're going to come back to is one of our cultural values that we're working through, which is church as family or church as a family.
Put your votes in now.
Put your votes in now. I like church as family. Removing the indefinite article. But what we wrote on that is when we think about church as family, we're thinking about engaging multi-generationally as spiritual fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters. I'm reading this off my wall. In love, care, generosity, and interdependence. So engaging multi-generationally as spiritual fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters in love, care, generosity, and interdependence. And so when we're thinking about this, what we're really thinking about is the church is a type of family. And you see this in the Gospels. You know, they come to find Jesus and, you know, who are my mothers and brothers and sisters? I'm paraphrasing this. But those who do the will of God are those who... I'm butchering this one. I'm going to go to Romans, which was the one I liked.
That's good. No, and Galatians 6:10 is the one I go to for this. Do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a really helpful verse to be like, okay, that's the category Paul is placing those of faith in. Is it's not just a random happenstance of people who might live close together or decide to drive to be together one day a week. It's the household, the family of God.
Yeah.
And that's helpful for me in thinking about this.
Romans 16:13. This is Paul's greetings at the end of Romans. He says, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, also his mother, who has been a mother to me as well." I think that one's so interesting because it's Paul talking about Rufus and his mom. And Rufus's mom has been a mom to Paul. And so this is where even we think of like, what is a spiritual mother? It's like Rufus's mom, who was a mother to Paul, is the example of that. And we don't know exactly what this looks like. I remember, I think it was when one of our professors was lecturing through Romans, but just like the personal nature of that relationship. It wasn't like, hey, you know, she goes to church too. It's like, no, she's been like a mother to Paul. And Paul needed Rufus's mother to be a mother to him as well. And I think that just presents some of the picture. Do you have another one, Patrick?
No, I was unable to find the other one just off the top of my head about the brothers and mothers and brothers. But even I like that Rufus one as an example because Paul is writing this letter and he references Rufus, who's living in Rome. But Paul's never been to Rome. But he knows Rufus's mom. So it's like if I was in a church with somebody whose mom was here, but they lived in New York City. And for some reason, I had to write a letter to the Church of New York City. I'm not planning on doing that. I don't know who would read it. I don't even know who I would send it to at this point, if I'm being really honest.
My parents moved back from New York City.
Yeah, I know
it.
This is the city of New York. I don't. Anyway, it's like, then I'm greeting someone I don't know because their mom has been really sweet to me.
Yeah.
And that's just an incredible thing to be able to say Paul's personal relationship across the board with men and women is this close, familial, beautiful relationship. That's really great.
Yeah.
And that's the call in so many ways.
I found the verse, Patrick.
Oh, great.
I used the internet. Matthew 12, verse 46 and to 50, it says, "While he was still speaking to the people, behold, his mother and his brothers stood outside, asking to speak to him. But he replied to the man who told him, 'Who is my mother, and who are my brothers?' And stretching out his hand toward his disciples, he said, 'Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother.'" And I just think that that's such a cool image. Like, Christ is saying, hey, if you do the will of my Father in heaven, those who hear him, those who follow him, his disciples, these are the ones doing the will of his Father in heaven, and they're his family. And so I think this is a way that is seen in the New Testament, that church is a type of family. And so that's why we're using this metaphor and this illustration, is because we think it's really helpful. And particularly when we get to the issue of the question of, can women be elders within the church? I think one of the ways to answer it that can be helpful and maybe sets people up, would maybe set someone back a little bit, is I would say women can't be elders in the church because mothers can't be fathers.
Yes. I'm going to rewind this conversation just a little bit first.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I used the phrase elder pastor.
Yep.
And you've just been saying elder.
Yes.
And the reason we're doing that is because in the New Testament, it's the same word. There's a group of words that are all talking about the same office.
Elder, pastor, overseer.
Yeah. Or bishop is also a part of that family. Yeah. It gets used in older translations. You're not going to find that in the ESV or the NIV, but it's there.
Yeah.
And so even just to have that in mind of when we are saying pastor, elder, overseer, the New Testament is using that as is one office.
Pastor, shepherd, which would...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, pastor, which pastor is just the Latin word for shepherd.
Okay, yeah, there we go. There was something with that. Yeah, so
yep.
Pastor is the Latin of shepherd, which is Greek.
Yep.
And so we are using those synonymously. And so and this is where I think sometimes our language betrays us in modern America, because we use the term shepherding to mean providing care for someone. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm used to that. But sometimes it's like we use the word shepherding so broadly that we can lose perspective of what we're talking about as a particular office, a shepherd.
Yep.
And I don't see the New Testament actually using that language in a vague sense in the way that we do in contemporary culture. And I think that adds to some of the confusion.
Yep.
So going back to what I'm saying is, when I think about the role of men and women within the church, we need spiritual fathers, we need spiritual mothers, we need spiritual brothers, we need spiritual sisters, we need sons and daughters.
Yep.
All those are part of it. And what we're trying to say is there's actually a beauty and a good thing in calling men and women to their distinctive roles within the church, rather than just saying there's a monolithic vision of what it looks like to be within the church. Because God has embodied and created us, male and female, with unique giftings. And so we view the spiritual father type role for the qualified men to step into eldership as one that is for, according to this teaching of the New Testament, seems pretty clear for qualified men. And so the passages we go to that for that would be Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 2 into 3.
Yeah.
And into 2 is talking about I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. And then into 3 is where you get the qualifications for elders. And
we spent some time last week talking about 1 Timothy 2. We'll talk about it a little bit today, but I don't want to rehash a lot of what we did last time with Tina and Hannah. But even as we say spiritual father, I would say that's something every man should strive to be, regardless of married or single. Because Paul has this line, as a single man, he raises up Timothy, who he calls his true child. And he just leaves it. So there's this real sense of spiritual fatherhood that Paul as a single man has.
Yeah.
And I would say every man ought to strive to be a spiritual father to younger men. And I think I can say that because in 1 Timothy 3, the first verse says this: "The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task." I think that right there is Paul saying you should want to be this kind of man.
This is good. This is the ideal.
Every man should want to be this kind of man.
Yeah.
Like every man should strive to be qualified in these ways. Like this is, in a lot of ways, I've called it like the archetypical picture of masculinity from the Bible. Like this is who you ought to strive for as a man. In the same way, I would say Proverbs 31 presents the archetypical woman of like, this is what femininity biblically is meant to look like in thriving. I'd say 1 Timothy 3 is the same thing for masculinity.
And obviously along with Christ.
Yeah, yes. You just don't get the same like clear, distinct description. Like the descriptions we get of Christ are in the four Gospels, and they're a narrative, and they're beautiful. They're he is the archetypical man.
Yeah.
Like he's not typical. He's the type.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of like Ephesians 5, where you get the archetypical husband presented in Ephesians 5 as the model of the husband.
Yep.
And so there's different ways, but yeah, this is absolutely, I agree. And so I think it's just worth reading some of this.
Yeah, go for it.
Therefore, verse 2, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil.
And that's such a helpful text in so many ways. Of even recently, it's just been the main text I've gone to as I've been discipling guys of like, how you doing? And then not a shame, not a condemnation, but like, if this is the thing we ought to be aspiring toward, it's a condensed list. And that's what I like about it.
And we've talked about this. It's a helpful vision for discipling men because it really is presenting an ideal of what would a man look like who is living faithfully within his home in such a way that he manages his own home well enough that he could be entrusted to manage the household of God. And that's what you see in verse 5.
Yep.
For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church?
And it's that direct connection. And this isn't to say you have to be a husband, father in order to be qualified by this text. But this text is saying if there is a husband and father who is not loving his family well, it's a huge red flag for not putting him in leadership.
Yeah.
It's like an easy one to just be like, you're actually not the right choice for this because you have this.
Yeah.
And I think single men, like that doesn't mean that single men are disqualified. Men without children are disqualified. That's not the case. But it's an easy way to see how a man actually is if you see the way he deals with his wife and his children.
Yeah. You see his character. You see how he's going to actually lead things. And if someone is not loving towards their wife, you don't want to be on the other end of them as a pastor. It's like, it's just foolish. It's not going to be helpful.
And that gets to when we say only men will be pastors and elders in our church. What we mean by that is only qualified men.
Yeah.
Because you are male does not qualify you for leadership.
No.
It is actually a far greater bar that actually allows a man to be that, which is why in partnership with our district, we'll have a group of men who are already qualified helping us lead the church at first, who are from other churches. But that's because we want to actually see qualified men raised up to lead in our church context with us. So that's even just a practical point of like, oh, why don't you guys have an elder board already? It's like, oh, well, we actually are like working with other men who we know are qualified because other churches have already approved of them.
And it's church in infancy.
Yeah.
Like Titus, Paul instructs Timothy to appoint elders in every town.
Yeah.
This is a minor theological point, but I don't think that a church has to begin with elders in place. But a church in infancy and a church in maturity are different.
Yeah.
In a church in maturity, must and should have qualified elders in place.
Yeah.
And so, like, a church can be birthed and not yet mature.
Yep.
And I think that's what we're doing is we're going through the stages of development as a church. And so that's part of our vision at the beginning is we want to see this be a thing. All right, Patrick, let me throw an objection at you.
All right. Hit me.
So, sounds like the men are going to get it pretty good, right? They
get to lead. They get to hang
lead.
out at the elders meetings and
Yep.
the elders retreats and all the fun elders things,
Yep.
right?
They get to do all and so sounds like it's like I'm messing with you, but
What? No.
what does leadership actually mean? Because I think this is something in our culture and in every culture. I mean, Jesus hits on this in his time, but there are bad versions of leadership where in our culture we can say, "Oh man, to lead, like you must really get the good end of the deal when you lead."
Yep.
Why is that wrong?
I mean, it goes back to the family picture for me, and even Ephesians 5 of what you've already referenced, where Paul is addressing husbands in the church. And the first instruction he gives, so this is Ephesians 5, verse 25, is husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. I actually think that is the call in so many ways on the pastors and elders of the church. That if we're saying these are the spiritual fathers of the church, they are to lead in such a way that this is the case. It's a call to husbands in their own homes to do this for their wives and for their children. But I think this is a really good picture of how are you going to lead? Are you actually going to lead in a way that's so sacrificial, that's others-centered, in such a way that you're actually able to present them before God holy, without spot or wrinkle, without blemish? Like, that's an incredible challenge. And I would say that's an incredibly invigorating call to ministry.
Yeah.
Of, like, this isn't something that's like, oh, you just get to be in charge and you get to look over the budget.
It's organizational leadership.
Which is the worst case scenario for me if all leadership was looking over budgets.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm just going to get out now. But if it's to join God in the work of raising up new disciples who grow in holiness, who love him, who love the people around them, and continue to grow in that throughout their life, because I'm giving my life so that they might be loved in the ways they need, like, that's an incredibly attractive call in my mind.
Yeah. And in the context in Ephesians 5:25, it's interesting is, so he's calling husbands to love their wives. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. So Paul, like, it seems like he's thinking particularly of the death of Christ. And so he says, hey, if you want to know what your love for your wife, who's called to submit to you in Ephesians 5, right before this, wives submit to your husbands, like that's before this. And now what does the husband do? He loves his wife, not just loves her, but loves her as Christ loved the church, which is a sacrificial death.
Yep.
And it's like, if our baseline expectation for leadership is martyrdom and giving up our lives for our wives, first of all, in the marriage, but then extrapolating that concept of sacrificial love, like, then you can't be the one who says, I'm just going to get the good end of the deal. My dad has always talked about this in marriage, of who gets the good end of the deal between Christ and the church. Like, Christ obviously cares for the church in such a way that It's like we are the benefits of that. And so if we think that leadership is about us getting to the good end of the deal, then we've bought into something that Jesus calls out as Gentile leadership. And so I'll go to that, which is Luke 22, verses 24 to 27. A dispute also arose among them as to which one of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is greater, one who reclines at table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at table? But I am among you as one who serves. As the one who serves. And we see the example of Christ. What did Christ come to do? Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the example we see in the life of Christ. That with his authority, it is for the blessing of those under his authority. You see, Gentile leadership is I'm going to benefit from those who are under me. I'm gonna suck out their resources, their life, their energy to bring about my flourishing. And Christ-like leadership is I'm going to pour out my life for the well-being, the flourishing of those under me. And so I think that's the picture of leadership that we actually get from Christ. And if that's the case, then we don't say, oh man, it is good to lead. It absolutely is, because you get to emulate Christ. And there's a burden and a challenge and something that we're called to as men. But it's not good in the way that the world says things are good.
Yeah. And so I want to get to the other side of this, though, because we're 20 minutes in and we've talked a lot about the role of men.
Sweet. Yeah. We got to flip it.
I want to say, like, what do we see as the role? So it's like spiritual fathers, this qualified men who are elders. Who do we see as the spiritual mothers and sisters in our church? Like, where is the place that the women in Crown Hill Church will shine?
I think that we talked about this last week some, and I think one of the helpful things that Hannah talked about was that the role of a woman is often more nuanced and poetic. If the role of men is more like prose and like clear writing, the role of women is often more like poetry. Because Hannah and I have talked about this a lot, because we're saying we've talked about how do we present a compelling and beautiful picture of what it means to be as men and women together in the church. Because I think what is not enough is to say women can't be pastors, and that's our vision of men and women in ministry together. It's like,
because it's just a vision of men in ministry.
It is just a vision of negation.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you were just to say, hey, men and women can do everything in the church the same, just women can't be pastors. I'm like, gross. Because what you just said is a woman can be 95% of what a man can be. But that 5%, yeah, she just can't do that. But like, we're cool, right? Because we said 95 was cool. I'm like, no, that's not a good vision. That's not compelling.
It's not enough.
You can make it 99%. You can make it 80%. You could say 20%, you know.
But it actually turns out that you can't say, like, just saying men and women are mostly the same, but they're kind of not the same. I would actually argue it's deeply unsatisfying.
It's deep, and it should be. And here's why. Because it presents men and women as relatively interchangeable and not really interdependent. Because you could just have a church of all men and it's like, well, we're mostly fine here. But the truth is you're not. And so here's the way I think about it. Of developmentally for a child, we know there are situations where a single father or a single mother raises a child. And the Lord blesses it, works through it, or kids are raised in a foster home. You know, there's all sorts of situations. But the ideal situation is a mother and a father. And there are countless intangibles about what it means for Hannah to nurture William. Like I was hanging out with William this morning, and it's funny the ways that he'll interact differently with me and Hannah. Because I think he knows that he has the compassion of Hannah in unique ways. And there's just something about a mom that a child just has a special comfort and attentiveness to. And there's something about a dad that there's something special about the relationship of a child, like in the ideal context. And just seeing, though, the ways that Hannah loves and cares for William and is kind and patient, there's like these countless, like, how would I count or measure the blessing of a mother for William?
Well, turns out there was a book that was published on it just earlier this year.
Great. What does it say?
An economist published a book called The Two-Parent Privilege.
Huh.
And her argument was basically we ought to do more to economically incentivize father and mother parenting.
Wow.
And she argued particularly for like a man and a woman committed to each other, committed to raising their kids together. Because of the economic output that it made a difference in.
Which is so low on our priorities.
It's so low on our priority list. But it's helpful even that like, okay, a non-Christian, worldly, purely economic source looking at this actually comes to find that there's something about the way the world is that actually proves this point.
Yeah.
And that's a helpful data point just to have in the background to be like, our valuing of women isn't just us like being like, oh, this is the culture we live in, so you got to say the women are good. It's like, no, there's actually an inherent beauty and incalculable value to women being women.
Yeah.
In the church.
Yeah. And tease that out with me. So what would you say, Patrick, are some of those? Yeah. We're saying it's incalculable, but we're going to try and give some words to it because otherwise that would be unhelpful.
Well, and so what's helpful for me is if masculinity tends to build walls that it maintains, femininity tends to fill those walls with life. And so this is like the abstract and the concrete being the difference between Tina and I in so many ways. Yeah. Like, Mark, you and I can go back and forth about so many abstract theology things that are good that actually keep, I would say, the walls of our doctrine in place. Yeah. But for me to have these conversations with Tina, it becomes far more practical, far more quickly, because she is so much more concerned about how is it actually going to impact her life and the lives of the people we minister to. That she actually wants to see people thriving in ways that are really good for them. And she gets there much more quickly than I do. Yeah. And I think that is a really beautiful picture of even the difference of like, I was happy for the first couple months in our house. We didn't have any decorations up. And it was like something that was just buzzing in the back of Tina's mind. Yeah. Of just like, oh man, it would be great if our house was actually cozy and comfortable.
Well, right now, Hannah is feeling the need. She's like, we got to set up our Christmas decorations. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like we can do that. But that wasn't like, I could have accidentally just slid by Christmas and been like, oh yeah, we missed it, I guess, this year. But I'm like, oh, I'm really glad. Like, it actually changes the tone of our home when we set it up, and it's important. It's valuable.
Well, and it's not just superficial, because I think that's the thing that sometimes people can slip into. It's like, these like superficial things. It's like, no, it's actually taking time to really rejoice and reflect and actually engage in life in a deeper, more satisfying way. Yeah. Because of the influence and because of the perspective that our wives have as women. Yeah. And I think that's what's so incredibly valuable as we think about like, okay, what does it mean to have really thriving life in a church? I don't think it can happen with just men.
Yeah. And I think that it's where you get to the picture of needing men and women. So what is one thing, and I like flipping this. So sometimes it's like, okay, well, women can't be pastors is what we're saying. But what are things that men can't do? And one thing I would say is men cannot disciple young women in the way that women can. Yep. And men cannot disciple young men in the way that women can. Yep. Rufus's mom is the example again. It's like, totally. It's like there was a uniqueness of her, of who she was to Paul that was significant. And we don't know the details of that. You can color it in with your own thoughts and imagination, as long as you know that biblical imagination is just that. A random hot take on something that we don't need to get into. Great. But there's actually a value in that. And so of what is it that women can do? It's like, well, one, we actually really need like to disciple the next generation of women. I actually think there's a huge challenge for women in our culture. I mean, if you only had social media as the challenge, it would be enough to be like, hey, this is a torrential tsunami that is like threatening to wipe out young women in our culture. Like the absurdity of the expectations on young women just from social media alone would be enough. But it's not just that. No. You know, these cultural expectations of what it means to be a woman in our culture are incredibly high. And because you need to succeed in your business, then you need to succeed as a mom if you go down that road. And just like the expectations. Yeah, go for it.
Because at the end of the day, what's happened is, as you look at the movement toward equality that's happened in the last 70 years, 150 years really, it's turned more into let's apply the standard of what a successful female life looks like to women, and let's apply the standard of what a successful male life looks like to women. So now women in our culture are having to live up to both female and male standards of success.
And not just female and male standards of success, Gentile male and female standards of success.
Yeah, like worldly, like you have to be super fit and make a ton of money and be an incredible mom.
Yeah. It's like, one thing that our friend Paul said was the message he's going to give to his daughter is not, you should grow up and be a CEO. Not because she doesn't have great like leadership skills or she might not have ways that she can play that out, but also because that's not the message he's going to try to give to his son. That this is the vision of success. If you grow up and are in leadership as a CEO, like this is the vision of flourishing. And I think in some ways we've taken the worldly expectations of success, even for men, and said, okay, now this is what women have to do and accomplish in order to have a meaningful life. And so it's like the traditional message would be this: you have value if you become a wife and a mother, which is actually wrong. Like you have value because God made you.
Amen.
And if you're single your whole life, like that can be a completely satisfying life. For example, see Jesus and Paul. And it's like there's plenty of value in that. Like we don't need to like, you know, okay, but then the traditional message or unhelpful traditional message would be that. The modern message is something like this: you don't have to be a mom. Just as long as you're a CEO, you know, it's like,
just as long as you wildly succeed in every other area.
It's like, but there's still this culture of expectation of, there's still a script of what the good life is. And I think that in part, what's confusing in our culture is that we put both those expectations, and then to mix that with the fact, so expectations on women mixed with the fact that we see young men like just flopping and really struggling in our culture. And so it's this like ironic thing. And I think here's the absolute wrong conclusion to make. Well, we got to choose. Are we going to help men or women in our culture? It's like, it's obviously a competition. And like, you either have to choose, like, am I going to go with like full tilt feminism, or am I going to go like absolute, like, you know, men only, and like we're gonna help the men take the territory? It's like, hey, that's a wrong view. As long as we view men and women in competition with one another, we've failed to understand even the beginning of God's design for male and female. Because he says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion, and he gives them the cultural commission. But to do it together. Because Adam needed a helper. And so like, when we think about what we're doing as the church and how we operate, we have to understand that it's not men versus women or women versus men, or we can choose, are we going to elevate men today or women today? It's like if you take away the value of men in a culture, women will suffer. If you take away the value of women in a culture, men will suffer. And I think that one of the particular challenges that we have is that we've conflated men and women to just people. And so we have this block of what's a person, which there is something, a person, you know, a human, that's a fine category, but it's not a fine only category. It's not exhaustive. And I think that we've flattened our view of humanity to just people in general without the view of male and female and the unique contributions of both of those. And I think that contributes to the complexity of the conversation that we have within the church.
But even what's so helpful is we talked earlier about, okay, men are compared to Christ as being the head. But
Within the marriage context.
Yeah, in the marriage context, you're right. And that's helpful. But even like in the marriage context, the helper word that gets used in Genesis for Eve, the other times that word comes up in the Old Testament is describing God as the helper of his people. And so there's this necessity piece that's tied in of like, you needed the help.
Yeah.
Like, and so both men and women have these divine comparisons that they get, where in marriage particularly, but I would say even more broadly, there's this sense of like, okay, there is a headship that men are called to, and there's a helpership that women are called to, and they need each other in that.
Yeah.
And one without the other is broken.
Yeah.
And they're broken in a variety of different ways, but the fact is this is complementarity at its core.
Yeah.
And even just to go back, we talked last time about this head body interdependence that happens.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's such a helpful thing, even in the church context. Because I would say that just as if a husband was detached from his wife and kids, he would still be the head, but he wouldn't really know how to lead well and love them well because he doesn't know them well.
Yeah.
And it's in those conversations.
And it's hard to nourish and cherish when you don't know.
Yeah, totally. And I would say the same is true of pastors and elders.
Yeah.
Like for pastors and elders to be detached, to be separated from the life of the actual congregation. They can make they will make decisions, they will lead, but it won't be in ways that are actually knowing the good that their people need. And I think that's so helpful about like this interdependence and this communication is women are so well keyed in to the good of others in I would say a way that men generally aren't. Now, I think there's a bell curve in all of this.
Yeah.
Of like, and there's a great image.
There's exceptions because there's rules.
There's exceptions because there's rules.
Yeah.
Like generalities are true. And I think even when we talk about how does masculinity and femininity work itself out in the lives of individuals, I like to picture it as, and you just will have to imagine this because this is a podcast, as two bell curves that are overlapping in the middle, where their peaks are distinct, but their ends overlap on one side and their ends go out on the other. And I think that's a really helpful way to think about, because the majority of men and majority of women are actually different.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And then there are lots of people in the middle.
Yeah.
Where your like the way your masculinity and your femininity get expressed looks really similar. And then there are extremes on both sides that can't be done by the other. And so I think that's, in my mind, this is helpful to be like, okay, there's still a real difference, even when it seems like there are some similarities. And there's actually a real call to live in that difference with freedom.
And those bell curves are even, are they characteristics? Is that the right, or traits?
I like the word expression.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Expressions of masculinity and femininity.
That's great. Because I was saying, I wanted to get to the fact that even if you're some of the ways that we are more traditionally female, that doesn't mean that makes you feminine in a very real way. Yeah. It's like it doesn't determine your ontological nature. Like it doesn't. Yes. And so it's an expression.
Yep.
That doesn't mean like, oh, you're kind of feminine in this way. It's like, I think that sometimes the way that people could take that is to view themselves on a gender spectrum. That's like our modern culture, where I think it's more helpful to understand that you have an ontological reality of male and female. And that if you like for example, for Hannah and I, there's some ways that we're just like over the top classic picture of masculine and feminine. But there's other ways where it's like, it's just really different. Like people talk about like needing a clean home. Like that's me. Like I'm the one who wants things cleaned up and organized. So it's like you could imagine like, oh, this is what your traditional breakdown's going to look like. It's like, oh, it's a little bit different. Like, and the mind that, is in a lot of different places at once, and you can just shut off your mind. Like we were talking about this with our core team. So like, it's not like just all guys are like, yeah, I can just shut off my mind. But some guys are that way. Like I'm not that way. Like they talk about the different ways that men's and women's minds are wired up, and sometimes I hear that I'm like, oh, the way you're describing is more like the female side. That's fine if that's a generality, like it may be unique, but I'm like, that doesn't make me a woman or some secret internal woman or something. It's like that's just like, yeah, there's different ways that can play out.
And this is like,
and that you can live out faithfully masculinity.
Yeah.
In those distinctions.
Yeah, because humans are the same and different. And that's like the thing that rings true over and over again in the scriptures is humans are the same and they're very different because of sex as a reality.
Yeah.
Because of male and femaleness as a reality, they're very different. And they're still human. And so there's all the sameness that's still happening. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the great issues I have with transgenderism is it takes these expressions and actually redefines the person under those expressions by the expressions.
Yeah.
And says, hey, you have some of these, like, you're floating over a little bit into the female category, so you might actually be a woman.
Yeah.
Instead of actually embracing, there's probably just a bigger spectrum of masculinity that can be embraced and loved. And the reality is, like, one of the things about me that is in our culture considered more feminine is how much I like to read. Like, that generally is a very feminine feature in our culture. And I love reading. It's a great thing. But my love of reading does not make me female. Yeah. And my love of reading actually looks different than the women in my life who love reading. Like, it's actually inflected differently, even though it's a similar expression of our humanness.
Unless there's some women who are reading a lot of St. Augustine.
Which there are. There are.
Even then it would be different. I'm messing,
like,
but yeah.
Like, that, there is still a reality beneath our expression of our sex that is male and female. Yeah. And that's a really sweet thing and a really good thing to embrace.
And I think part of what's helpful about clarifying that is I think it can free from anxiety of
is there a particular picture that I need to look like?
Yeah, otherwise I can't be faithful in this. And there absolutely are things we're called to grow into. And so we can accept that, like the passivity that we struggle with as men. Like there are ways that we're called to grow into being intentional, purposeful, willing to sacrifice and serve. Like there's absolutely growth in those areas. And so I think it's helpful to distinguish between, okay, what are areas of growth and what are like just natural dispositions, temperaments that are should belong in a different category. And not that you can't have a natural disposition that in some ways still needs correction. Like I could say, well, I'm just naturally a little bit more lazy. It's like, well, you might need to learn to work hard, you know. Go for it though.
Well, and I think even just so that people know, at some point in the near future, Tina and Hannah are going to sit down with Beth, your mom,
Beth
Mark,
Luby, yeah.
And talk about biblical femininity.
Yeah.
And have a similar conversation to the one we had with your dad, Jim.
Yeah.
And so I think that's helpful. If even like more is coming from
and they're
really great sources.
And I think we talked about the prose and the poetry. I think we're laying some guidelines. They'll color this thing in a lot better than we can right now. We're laying some foundation and doing what we can, but I think they'll help give some of that clarity.
Yeah, the reason we wanted to have this conversation is because we wanted to say, as the pastors of Crown Hill Church, whatever this thing turns out to be, yes, we will have a place for qualified men to lead as elders and pastors alongside us, but we need mature women who are going to be leading in really significant ways, discipling women in all the ways we can't, discipling young men in all the ways we can't.
Yeah.
To actually be a part of our church, loving our community, loving our people well.
And discipling us as the pastors.
Because
I really do have a vision of discipleship of like every believer is contributing in a real way to your discipleship to Christ. And like we are going to, and so I think that's the call that's helpful. We need women to be who God has made them in our church. Without that, we will suffer and die.
Yep.
A miserable death.
A miserable masculine heavy death.
Gross.
And like all of this gets back to really our view of relationships.
Yeah.
Of like, we just don't think one man by himself is enough to sustain a church.
No.
Except for the Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The God-man. Who then commanded his people to gather as people. Not just as singular individuals who happen to end up in the same place. Mm-hmm. And be brought together as a family. It's like, that's the command we're following here. Is we're saying, as spiritual fathers, as spiritual brothers, we can partner with our wives as spiritual mothers and sisters, and then all the people that God brings into our life to fill in those gaps, to say, oh, we can actually be a really beautiful picture of God's family to those around us.
Yeah.
And man, I maybe I say this too much, but there's just so much loneliness happening in the lives of so many people right now.
Yeah.
That to really be a spiritual healthy family as a church, to be a spiritually healthy family as your own family is one thing.
Yeah.
But to be a spiritually healthy family as a church is what our culture needs so badly right now.
Yeah. And I think just one more call on that. I think the way that my wife has changed the relationships I have with people is so life-giving. So if we're using the trellis and the vine of like, the trellis sets up a structure, the vine fills it with life. Think of the way that even just hospitality in our home is different because we are a family. Not in the least because we actually have a child, which is because we're interdependent to create a child.
Yep.
And we're going at this thing together of raising children, which brings something we can invite people into. But I just think of the value and the life that brings. So yeah, we need women to bring life and joy into the church. And it's a blessing that we have. And the women who God has placed in our lives. And so we're grateful for that. Yeah.
I think, again, on this topic, there's so much more to say in so many directions. I think the books, I think What's the Difference by John Piper is just a really helpful 100-page ebook. You can download the PDF right now on Desiring God. And it's really helpful. It's great. And he has an even bigger book that gets into a lot of these passages we've talked about here and really gets into like why, okay, the Greek says this and how can we understand that this is not just an argument that Paul is making to first century Romans, but is actually an argument that God is making to all of his people everywhere for all time. Because that's what we believe about the scriptures, is ultimately, though they were written by men, they were inspired by God to give us words that apply everywhere all the time.
Yeah. And even when a particular context is addressed, there's principles and reality. And that's what, if we're talking 1 Timothy 2, that's what you see, is Paul's reasoning makes it clear that he's not talking about just something going on in Ephesus in the first century. He's addressing much bigger things. I think wrapping it up to the way I'm thinking about these conversations around male and female, men and women, I guess men and women in the church and in society and our homes, is this is a conversation that we're committed to having imperfectly because we're committed to having it.
Yes.
And I'm like still not at the point where I'm like, man, I feel like here's the perfect articulation of all these things. But I think this is a very, very important conversation in our current culture, not just in our culture as Christians, but in our culture, it's a really insignificant conversation. I think there's a lot of confusion. And I think, again, I think about a conversation like this. If we can move the ball down the road, let me mix a few more metaphors, and get you closer to a first down. I think that was just two. I just went back. But if we can move the ball down the road a little bit, if we can make some progress in a conversation like this, I'm like, oh, that's valuable. And I think that the conversation that my mom and Tina and Hannah will have will be another piece that we'll be adding to that. But I think this is important to talk about. How do we understand the beauty and the design in what God has given us as men and women, to be able to have conversations about it, not to just put it as a back burner awkward thing, and then to really celebrate the uniqueness and blessing that it is that God has created us as men and women. And if we can get the ball down the road just a little on that, then I think a conversation like this is worth it.
Yeah. And as questions come up, we want people to reach out to us and talk to us. So if there are questions you have, thoughts you have about this, things that you're like, but what about this? And what about this? We would love to talk to you about this. This is like why we're in ministry, is to actually talk to people about why life according to Christ is the greatest possible thing for humans.
Yeah.
Like that's what we want to talk about. So feel free to reach out. My email is, I think, in the contact info for the show. Feel free to reach out, pj.sobecki@gmail.com. Mark, our wives would love to talk to you about any of these issues, any of these questions. This is what we love. So thanks for listening today. Thanks for joining us on another wild, wonderful podcast about what's going to be distinctive about our church. Anything to say, Mark?
Nope. Thanks for listening.
Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.